Hi. A few weeks ago, I visited artist Paul MacCormaic's exhibition Icons at the Courthouse Gallery in Tinahely, and I talked to him about his work. I hope you'll come along with me and take a little time to enjoy his paintings, our conversation, and maybe gain a little understanding and appreciation of this observant, funny, and very talented painter. I'm here with Paul MacCormaic to discuss his exhibition, which is called
Icons 2.
Icons 2. It's the second of a series of exhibitions, and Paul is an Irish painter from Dublin.
That's right, yeah.
You've got the rough Dublin accent, and I've got the posh one.
Where did you get yours?
From Sutton.
Just
down the road.
People growing up within a kilometre of each other having a different accent, isn't that hilarious?
Yeah, it's hilarious, yeah. And there's so many original accents from Dublin, you know, like all the different areas have their own. My granddad had a Drumcondra accent, you know, like even within the inner city, there were different areas.
My father and mother had a lovely accent, which is now extinct, I'm sorry to say. But it was a city centre working class accent, and it was lovely and soft. And they'd say things like petrol and worms and stuff like that instead of worms. And that generation is gone. It's been replaced by a more harder inner city accent now, and it's just gone. It was a lovely accent, extinct now.
But it is interesting. Like I remember my nephew, he was writing down a shopping list, you know, when he was young for my sister, and he put down like SOWALT, salt, you know, for salt.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's still, you know, the years pick it up. It's quite interesting.
There's even phrases. I remember working in Duns many years ago, and there's a big Ballyfermot contingent, and they used to use the phrase, "Didn't you know? Having you something? Did you not sweep the floor? Didn't you know?" And that was just a little colloquialism from distinctly in Ballyfermot. Don't know if it's still in use today or not as well. You see, that was even 40 years ago, you know.
Okay, well let's have a look at the work and hope everyone understands our accents. You're taking essentially a medieval aesthetic.
Yes.
And updating it. You know, these
exactly
have really very strongly the look of the medieval icon.
They do.
You're using the sort of the gilding, the elaborate frames, and the sense of sort of invested meaning and value in the icon. And you're basically like stripping out all the old religious content and replacing it, or using the old religious language, Madonna and Child things, but updating it and using the old idea, which, you know, the memory of the old picture, to comment on the new reality.
Yes, indeed. Now, I was raised as a Catholic, and there's certain things, even though I'm a devout atheist, I know, as a child, I actually never really felt that there was a God or an angel looking after me. But then when I was about 15, and you start reading books on existentialism and stuff like that, then I really declared myself, I don't believe in God, I don't believe there is such a God. But when you're brought to Catholic churches, I used to be brought by my granny and all that, and you'd light a penny candle, and when you're brought up on that sort of aesthetic, it never really leaves you. It's like heavy metals in your blood, you know, you never really get rid of the mercury or the lead if you've absorbed it as a child, you know.
Can you tell me about this picture?
Okay, well, this one here is called The Republican for short, but it has a much longer subtitle. It's called "Even as a Child, I Always Hated That Story, The Princess and the Pea." And it's really, as you can see, it's a self-portrait, and it's putting my feelings about the kind of ideal political setup I'd like, which is a republic, and we do live in a republic, although it's far from perfect. But what it's about is, as a child, I grew up reading those Ladybird books, and I absolutely loved them. Do you remember them yourself, Conor? There was an illustration on one side and a text on the other. And I loved them all. And there was the Three Little Pigs, and the Elves and the Shoemakers, one of my all-time favourites. And I actually feel like the shoemaker sometimes going into my studio in the morning just wishing some elves had finished off one of my paintings. But anyway, this one the Princess and the Pea, I absolutely hated it at the time. And I just think that even though my father's politics was secret, my mother's politics was even more secret, I just felt it instinctively that I did not like an entitled, privileged class going around expecting to be treated extra special. And in case you don't know the story, what happens is this beautiful young woman appears to a sort of peasant couple. She says she's a princess, she's after getting lost or whatever, and they don't believe her. So they put her to a test and they get her to sleep on about a dozen mattresses, and they put a pea at the very bottom of the mattress, and she wakes up in the morning complaining that she didn't sleep well because she felt the pea through the mattress. And of course the peasant couple say, oh, she must be a princess, you know. So that really gets to me, and I didn't know the 70th Jubilee of the Queen of England was coming up, so, but it's really sort of, I feel it's all the more poignant now that we have this privileged class by birth who are basically descended from people who just took the land by force, and then and all the cost that goes with it. So that's me, the Republican. I've used the harp as the symbol of Irish republicanism, and it's really the original sort of 1798 rebellion type thing, Wolfe Tone and Robert Emmet and all those. And the traditional colour for the background of the Irish Republican flag was actually blue. And somehow it's become green and associated with this green and verdant land of ours. But the traditional colour was blue, and blue looks much better against the gold anyway. So I got myself a Barbie doll as a sort of symbol of the princess these days. And you're getting a lot of it. Again, we talked about the social media moment. We're still getting a lot of these princesses, sort of the new royalty on you know, the Kardashians and all that. So I got myself a doll. A couple of my sister of mine has a collection of them. That one was the best. It was the pink, and then a little pea in there. And again, even the use of pink. If you find a bag on the road today and it's pink, you're sure, oh, a girl is after losing this. And I just wonder, what happened to feminism, where you now have girls almost exclusively associated with pink and wanting to be associated with pink, buying pink everything, pink runners, jumpers, everything like that. It's almost as though some of the advances of feminism have been just cast aside. So that's it.
The origin of the pink and the blue for boys. Like, blue is the sky, and pink is a watered down version of red. So it stands for the earth. So
oh, really?
Yeah, it's earth and sky.
My grandparents.
It goes back to Uranus and Gaia.
Well, that's new to me, and thanks for the information. But my parents, I don't know where it came from. You just had to tell me. I didn't know where it came from. But my grandparents told me that in the sort of 30s and 40s, it was the other way around. Boys were dressed in pink and girls in blue.
Okay, Paul, tell me about this picture. Okay,
this is a picture called The Half Brothers. And the structure of it is based on, say, a little diptych, like the Wilton diptych, just folds over, or a family album that you can just open up. But at the basis of it is two people who are basically half brothers, okay? And the reason I'm mentioning that, a number of the paintings in the show are about what I'm finding is the new family structure. I mean, I'm 61 years of age. I grew up in a time when people got married, had children, stayed together even if they hated each other's guts, and raised a family. Now, fantastic. We have, a girl can become pregnant outside of marriage, raise her kids, no fuss, keep her kids, no bother, the whole thing is. But what's happening in society is you're now getting people who may have had a relationship earlier on, they have children by one man, and that, there's always a possibility that they'll have children by another man, and then you have half siblings, brothers and sisters, and half brothers and half sisters. Now, I worked in a lot of schools, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of families that have, for one reason or another, children by different fathers. And the interesting thing is, when they'd be getting on well, there was one brother and sister I remember in particular. When they were getting on well, they said, "Oh, here's my sister Joan," or whatever her name is. But when they were arguing, they'd always say, "This is my half sister Joan." And the thing is, they were putting that bit of distance between themselves. But it's had other effects on society as well. There is anecdotal evidence, and I know one story in particular. of families just getting separated. So one boy is reared somewhere else, the half-sister is reared somewhere else, and they have actually got together. They met at a disco, or they met online or something like that, and they didn't really check into their background, and they started dating. So you've got a half-brother and sister dating, and in some cases the parents found out about it, or somebody eventually alerted to them for the fact, hey, you're half-brother and sister, this will have to end. So that's the sort of a comment that is. There's a lot of the ones here have the commentary on the modern family and the shape it's taken. And if you recall back to the Byzantine and Renaissance ones, they were all about the ideal family as well. There was the Virgin Mother, Joseph, all together, and the woman's role as a mother. The woman would only be virtuous if she was a mother. There was no such thing as a career or anything like that.
And these two, are they actually brothers?
No, they're actually cousins. This is my nephew, Jamie MacCormaic, and this is my nephew, Jamie Mark, I'm forgetting his name, Alessandro Persicchini, right? And he's, so they're half as related as half-brothers. Half-brothers, cousins are half as closely related as half-brothers. But they do have a slight, a good difference in appearance. You know, he does have the Italian hooked nose, and he looks a lot more, he's paler, has a lot more Irish in him. So there's enough difference in them to show that they're from different fathers. In fact, they're from different mothers as well. But so that's why I chose them. And I just like the small scale of it as well. The Wilton diptych is quite small, and then a little family album is quite small as well. So that's what I was trying to mimic.
Paul, can you tell me about these two pictures?
Okay, these two pictures are actually associated conceptually with each other. And in some ways, this one is the epitome of the show as regards the secular icons and the secular way in which we conduct our life. It's called the poverty line setter. And in many ways, it's an illustration or an allegory of, you'll be familiar with allegories, Conor. It's of a concept that you can't really, you never really see. It's not something concrete, but we use it all the time. So we talk about when the government sets a budget, say, they'll talk about the poverty line. They set the poverty line somewhere. For instance, they might just say how much you have to earn before you can get a SUSI grant, or how much you have to earn before you can go on the dole, or they'll cut the dole, or the age at which you become entitled to the bus pass. All of these have enormous effects on people, and it is civil servants with the government in power, but it's largely civil servants behind the scenes who set it. So a good friend of mine, John Murphy, is a retired barrister, and he really looks the part, doesn't he? So I got him to pose for me in his suit and tie, and he's just taking a marker and he's setting the poverty line somewhere. It's just arbitrarily above it, you don't get it, below it, you do. That's that. So you can imagine that's the budgets and all that. And so here we go. On the other side is sort of, that's the cause and this is the effect. When a government sets budgets, there's another expression called they pick the low-hanging fruit. Okay, when they have a budget, you go for cigarettes and booze, maybe 5 cents on petrol and diesel, right? And we've seen the effect of diesel and petrol recently. So that's what it is. It is literally an illustration of the whole idea of the picker of low-hanging fruit. But interestingly, I love the way. Did you ever see the way? They simplified trees, and a lot of the trees are sort of done almost as a motif of a tree. So I did it. It's not any particular species of tree. It's just one of these trees that you sort of see in a lot of medieval art. And again, nicely balanced. There's the same distance between here, there, and everywhere. And of course, myself as a self-portrait, picking away at
sort of based on the figure of Adam or Eve.
No, nothing like that. No, it's just I can see the connection now that you mention it, but no, it's simply, and this is why for me the titles are so important. The picker of he's picking the low-hanging fruit. It's just the easy targets. You know, they won't go after in the budgets. They won't go after the super rich. They'll always go for the PAY worker. You know, that's the sort of thing.
Tell me about the frames? You make the frames yourself?
I do, yeah. The frames are made from very simple and available material. These are actually banisters in a house that I had. I took the banisters out of a house. So I worked in a school where there was a woodwork class, and I just got the woodwork teacher to run it along a bandsaw, and I split them. So I have loads of them. I must have got 20 from the banisters, and I just split them, and then I just cut them at the right point, because I do want them to look like classical columns with a capital and all that, and they do taper. The classical columns do taper at a certain angle, and they don't look right. If you have them straight, they don't look right. If they taper too quickly, they don't look right. So that's where I got them, and these are made from, you can go into any hardware shop and buy these simple mouldings for about an 8-foot length is about €4, and I use them, and then the back is MDF. It's about 10mm MDF, and I don't paint directly on MDF because it's not acid free, and so what I do is I glue either acid-free paper to it or a canvas to it, a thin canvas, not the normal canvas I use, which is too thick, but you can get thin canvas, and it's ideal for gluing to it, and that'll guarantee that the thing isn't going to fall apart in a couple of 100 years' time, you know.
Yeah, but it has to stay dry. That's the only thing with the MDF. Like, you can't have it's basically.
Oh, it's terrible stuff for absorbing. You know? Yeah, it's absorbing the moisture. Yeah, I sold one to Louth County Council, and I had the conservator of the county conservator on to me, and basically saying, "Oh no, what did you do? Did you seal the back of it? Did you seal the back of the MDF?" She said, "No, I didn't know." "Oh, you got to seal it. They're terrible for absorbing moisture." Yeah.
Yeah, well, you better watch out for flooding. You know, when Florence was flooded, a lot of the old, the old panels survived. You know, they floated down the river. You know, like Shimabue's crucifix and that sort of thing were left floating in the water, but they were oak panels. So they survived,
yeah,
sort of, you know.
Mine wouldn't.
The MDF won't.
No.
Watch out for global warming.
Well, look, we'll keep them upstairs. Okay, well, this one is simply called The Loaves and Fishes Diptych, but it has, like some of my other work, has a very long subtitle, and it goes like this. It says, "Just how does the story go? Was it 2 loaves and 5 fishes, or 5 loaves and 2 fishes?" And the reason I did it is because I've noticed that, again, as a teacher and a teacher of history of art, I'd be telling my students the subject matter of a particular painting. They don't know these stories, and I think there's a whole wealth of stories, along with Aesop's fables, along with the Greek tragedies and all that. They're just great stories, and a lot of them have moral implications. And there are a lot of expressions like the last straw, like that's the last straw. That comes from, is it one of Aesop's fables? I think it is, isn't it? And so, you know, people will say, "Oh, that's the last straw, I'm out of here," but they don't really know the roots of the story. So again, I just thought, I sometimes get confused. Was it 5 loaves and 2 fishes? But now I know it's you got your starchy food and you got your protein. So there would have been more starch at the time. It's also a parable that I actually don't understand. I mean, a lot of the parables in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, I do understand, you know, sowing the seed and on rocky ground and stuff like that. But I actually don't understand the feeding of the 5,000. But that's me. I'm into fishing, so that's from a different scene. It's one of the earliest ones I did. It's about 2008, this one is. So I was fishing in, it's actually from a pond in the Phoenix Park, believe it or not. 2 nice perch and a couple of mackerel I was fishing there. So I just placed it. I don't have a body like that, by the way. That is actually, believe it or not, that is Tom Jones's body. And my head plopped on top of it. Yeah.
Why did you put that body in?
I was a bit embarrassed. It just looks so better if you have a nice triangular body, you know. If I had there I am with my gut sticking out.
Let's talk about this.
Oh God, right. All right. Well, here I am the way I look today. I'm in a sorry state. This is one of the ones, this is called Before and After. And again, it's a hinged diptych, it opens up. This time, just from a formal point of view, Skin tones and gold do not go well together. So wherever I have a diptych or an icon that has a lot of flesh in it, I can't use gold. So I was looking at some of the old icons, and some of them have patterns like this in the background. So I did this simplistic blue one. Anyway, this is me, and these two photographs were taken at the same moment. This is me letting it all hang out, and this is me pretending I've lost loads of weight, just keeping my belly in. And what it's about is body image. Again, a lot of the icons were about the image of the Virgin, the image of the ideal family and all that. And then the modern version of that is the enormous pressure on people to be in shape. And if you ever see that magazine, Men's Health, it's just look at it. You don't have to buy it. Look at it on the shelves in the magazine shop. 9 times out of 10, the cover story is how to get great abs in 15 minutes, or how to get great abs with, in 6 weeks on 200 calories a day, or whatever. Crazy stuff. It's all about that. And I thought, if I'm going to point the finger at people who are out of shape and, the subject of body image, why not myself? So that's it. That's where this one came from. Of course, and as you can see, I was definitely, that wouldn't look so good in the 5 loaves and 2 fishes with your belly hanging out over the top of your trousers,
Okay, so that leads us to this picture. Can you tell us about this one?
Okay, well, this one is in the same theme as body shape again. This time it's looking at the female side. Now, women come under even more pressure than men to have this ideal shape and feel ashamed almost of being fat or whatever, or too thin even as well. And then you had that terrible size 0 thing, which thankfully that trend has gone where women were skeletal, and that was considered the way to look. People were getting praise for, I can see your ribs, as that sort of thing. So anyway, this image is actually lifted from an ad for a slimming product, and you see the woman, and she's trying to close her jeans. And there are types of jeans that are marketed as one size fits all, and because they're kind of stretchy, and that's nearly the kind of jeans I'm wearing these days. But the title is actually taken from a Homer Simpson quote, where you may remember he deliberately went over 300 pounds to avail of certain work conditions and disability allowance. But as he went to put on his trousers, he just goes, they wouldn't fit, he just goes, one size fits all, my ass.
So this one is Madonna and Child?
No, this is Madonna of the smartphone.
Yeah.
Now, I know it can be confusing because it could easily be called Madonna and Child. But basically, the very first icon I did, not long after I graduated from UCT, was called Madonna of the cordless phone. And it's sold, so I don't have it anymore. It's illustrated in the catalogue. And at the time, the cordless phone was the thing to have, because mobile phones still hadn't really taken off, and there was no such thing as a smartphone. And in it, you see a woman, and she's a very attractive woman with a child. The child has a wooden spoon. And she's trying to multitask, talk into a cordless phone. Now, these days, nobody has landlines, so the cordless phone they've all been scrapped. But I just updated it to the smartphone. So it's the same thing. It's the multitasking woman trying to do everything, and the huge expectations of women. Women are expected so much, get your figure back after having a baby, and then a lot of the time, the women are it's the woman who has to deliver the baby to childmind, the women left doing most of the work, washing the nappies and stuff like that. So it's just a modern take on it, and of the expected multitasking modern mother, really.
Tell me about what you've used in the background of this one.
I've used cigarette foil, and the reason I did that is when I set out making them originally, I didn't want to, I could have got gold foil, real gold leaf. It's not that expensive, it's a little bit tricky to paint on, but the main thing was I didn't want my icons to look too reverent. I wanted them to be a big 2 fingers to the church. So I wanted something common and like cigarette foil, replacing them like that. So that's why I picked cigarette foil. And I did test them for durability with the sunlight. I put one in a book sticking out and I put it in my window for a year, and there was no fading. Now they could fade. I don't know. They may have to be looked after, but they don't fade rapidly anyway. The way some colours do that are fugitive. So no, that's what it is. It's cigarette foil. And
yeah, I did wonder why you didn't use gold leaf, but I suppose I've an interesting story myself in that I went to Bulgaria back in 1999, I think it was, to see the total eclipse, and as part of the trip, we sort of travelled around and visited these Orthodox churches, and you had the icons, and you had the monasteries, and then we visited this place where they were making the icons, but I was a bit shocked because the monks were using sweet wrappers instead of gold.
Wow.
And I was aghast, because I thought, Jesus Christ, this sort of tradition. But they were using chocolate wrappers,
which I have used. There's Ferrero Rocher in there somewhere,
and acrylic paint, and I sort of thought, God, this is dreadful. But at the same time, you sort of think, okay, well, if these are basically now they're for the tourist industry. They're trinkets, so you could make a postmodern justification for exactly what they were doing. So really, I think that the question about authenticity today is, what is the best material for your purpose? Are you being authentic to your aim by not using the gold? But you've obviously thought it through. Using the acrylic gold on the frame and stuff like that is the best way to go.
It seems to be. Now I'm a bit lazy. When I do the acrylic ones by hand, I use two forms of gold. You can get loads of different types of gold. There's sort of a reddish gold, pale gold, antique gold, Renaissance gold. But I got ones that are contrasting, so you get this sort of shimmering, sort of checkered flag look, which I like. But I do it by hand. I don't measure it, so I wanted to have that handmade look where it's slightly off. It's actually hard work cutting out. This is actually my late mother mashing potatoes. It's part of the sub-series Domestic Goddesses. So just cooking potatoes, just a normal chore, and potatoes so very Irish a thing. But the background is done in two types of acrylic gold paint, and I underpaint them with what's known as Indian red or red oxide of iron. That's something I learned when I was in UCD, that the glue that they use to glue the original gold to the icons is called bole. Is it bole or bole? Bole. And it's an oxblood red, and it actually sets off. You might think that the best undercoat for gold would be yellow or yellow ochre or something like that. No, really, a red really sets it off. And if little bits, you can just about see it here where it's semi-transparent, if little bits of the red show through, it really lifts the colour of the gold far more than if you put it on yellow, it just saps the gold out of it. But it's much quicker to do it that way. There's a lot of work in cutting out cigarette foil, I can tell you. If you're going around cigarette foil with a scalpel and trying to get it in and out through there and in there and all that, a lot of work. It's a lot easier to do it that way.
Okay, Paul, tell me about this one.
Okay, this is a triptych that was inspired by the visit to a museum in Crete that specialised in icons and had all sorts of variations on the icon, different shapes, different materials of all. But one really caught my eye, and it was this triptych that was done in this way. This one here folds in there like that, and this one folds in here like that. So it can be closed up and transported and taken away. So I really liked it. So I got, I had a door at home that the very bottom part of it was rotten and had to be replaced. But at the upper panels, it was one of these Georgian style doors. It's solid mahogany. And I kept all the panels. And then so this is not on MDF, this is on mahogany. And I did the carpentry. And then I decided the contents would be part of the sub-series on domestic goddesses is women's role in cleaning. There's a whole load of subtext to women doing the cleaning. A lot of the cleaning around our house falls to women. Men will get stuck in every now and again, but it's really expected of a woman to be clean. You know, a man can kind of get away with a house that's a bit untidy, or a bachelor's house may not look well, but if a woman lets the standard down, it seems like it's almost, she's not virtuous in any way. So I just, three of my friends, two of my sisters and a friend of mine, I just got them to pose for the thing. Of course, I had to get them to wear blue or black to just stand out with the gold. And a triptych, in my opinion, all the triptychs I've seen, including the greats of Hieronymus Bosch and all that, they always have something formal binding them together. And it's usually the horizon line. And in this case, I put the floors all at the same level. So different tiles, you know, wooden floor, tiles, and then just dusting, sweeping, and mopping. So it's just very simple. There's nothing more to it than that. But I just love the fact that you can kind of play with it, you know, and put it away and open it up and all that.
Paul, tell me about the last man in Ireland to darn his socks.
Well, it's a self-portrait, but it's about, again, remember the underlying thing is ethics. And one of the ethical things we're supposed to be doing these days is recycling, reusing, repurposing everything. I say I think it's the 5 hours. Everybody goes reduce, reuse, recycle. But I have a fourth one, repair. And so few people repair things these days. Where I live, if a kid's bike gets a puncture, there's as much likelihood that the bike will just be dumped on some waste ground, and all that's wrong with it is a puncture. Loads of kids can't even fix a puncture. So when I was growing up, we had woolen socks, and woolen socks are notorious for wearing out quickly, especially at the heel. So it was a thing you learned when I was a kid, was how to darn. So even though socks these days are really cheap, if the heel goes on mine, I still darn them. I won't chuck them out. People think it's comical, but I won't chuck them out. And I just think that you know, we need to just keep repairing things.
Yeah, it struck me that it's quite a poignant image, you know, and I suppose one of the things about the icon, like the traditional icon, points to a time that's passed.
Yeah.
Essentially, that you know, it's historical, you know, and that you were sort of locating yourself historically, you know, through making the icon of yourself.
Yeah, well, it's just something I still do, which is almost an anachronism, is darning a 50-cent sock, you know, and just trying to get a few more weeks out of it rather than chuck it in the bin.
Can you tell me about the ambassadors?
Oh, the ambassadors is the short name for the twin portrait of Katie Taylor and Alana Audley Murphy. Now, there's quite a story to this. So what happened was, many years ago, in 2001, I was working in a place on the south side of Dublin. I'm from the north side. So I was late for work. I got stuck in traffic. I was on my way and I was listening to the radio. And at the time, the Marion Finucane show was a 9 o'clock show in the morning. So I was supposed to be in work at 9 o'clock, so I was late. And who did she have on around 9:30 in the morning? It was Halloween 2001, which is the 31st of October. She had these two girls on, 15 years of age, and they were about to make history by being the first two girls to box under the auspices of the Irish Amateur Boxing Association that night in the National Stadium. So my ears peaked. I'm interested in women and girls getting into traditional roles that were dominated by men. Now, we all know the story now. Katie Taylor went on to be undisputed world champion, just recently fought a really, really tough battle and won. And Alana Audley Murphy, her career, she went into the British Army, where she became a physical training instructor and a boxing instructor there. So she had a bit of a career herself, but not nearly as starstruck as Katie Taylor's. But So that's what it was. When I heard the two of them were going to do that, and they're so brave. I mean, I really admire boxers. Think about it. As a sport, you're going in, you're on your own. It's not a team sport. There's only you, your opponent, and they're going to box the head off each other. And it's an ancient sort of way of showing your fitness and your agility, and it's also training for self-defense tactic and all that. So I'm not one of these people who want to see an end to boxing, or I'd like to see boxing remain safe. Basically, I thought of the idea of them in the form of the Holbeins ambassadors. So the two of them would be either side of a double desk, similar to the one that used in the ambassadors, with items pertaining to the two of them. The favourite things, like at the time there was a VHS recording of Friends that belonged to Katie Taylor. I mixed them around so that you couldn't tell who's which, because I wanted them just to be considered as sports people, but also there was a sort of political and even a sectarian dimension to it. Alana Audley Murphy is very much down the line, unionist, loyalist and all that. The uniform she wears is red, white and blue. She too played football, but it was for, I don't really know much about sport, but there's an Northern Ireland League that is principally supported by Protestants and all that. So they were very much, different sides of the political divide around here. So I mixed the paraphernalia from them around slightly, not to say this is one's and this is the other, and maybe a bit of a guessing game. But that was it. I just wanted to mark the occasion. Little did I know, Katie Taylor could have given up boxing 6 months later. But little did I know, she was only 15 then, and she went on to be the superstar that she is.
Tell me about your portrait of Catherine Corless.
Well, the portrait of Catherine Corless is actually the pivotal piece of work in my career as an artist, and it's really down to a lot of luck. The portrait itself was shortlisted for the Zurich Portrait Prize. It got me a lot of attention, and then the National Gallery of Ireland bought it. So that is one of the, that's the pinnacle of the achievement as far as I can see in my art career. So it was great. It's been really great for me. But it really is down to a lot of luck. What happened was, I set about doing this. It's actually based on the women's work that I was doing in the icons. But I set about doing a series called The Vanquished Writing History. Because as well as reading history of art in UCD, I read history. And one of the things I realised, again, it was a bit visceral, was that history is generally written by the victorious. They win a war, for instance, World War II. They win a war and they put the Nazis on trial at Nuremberg and hang them all, and etc. And I remember a man called McNamara, who was the defense secretary of the time, and he was being interviewed, defense secretary in America at the time, and he says, if we'd have lost the war, it would have been us on trial for bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Dresden. So it's the victorious who write history. And as a poor working, I'm doing well now, but I came from a poor working class family of 10 in Finglas. And I was really, really aware that, the ordinary person's story is not told. So I set about doing this series called The Vanquished Writing History. And it was during COVID that I conceived it. And I wrote letters to lots of people who qualify. And basically, to qualify for it, you had to either advocate on the part of somebody who was the victims of something, or you advocated yourself. For instance, you told your own story, it wasn't believed. Originally, a lot of the survivors of abuse, like the Golden Bridge, they weren't believed at first. They were laughed off the stage. And it's come to be that the accepted thing that enormous amounts of abuse took place in the state institutions. So I wrote to Catherine Corless, a very simple address. I didn't know her address. I just said Catherine Corless, Tuam, County Galway, and it got to her. And lo and behold, she lifted the phone to me and says, I'll do it. So as soon as the restrictions were lifted, I shot across the country with my camera and I photographed her in her kitchen. Before I did so, we had a chat about the composition and what I wanted in it. She knows a bit about photography herself and composition. So when I got there, her kitchen was already laid out with all the stuff that you see in the portrait, the maps and birth certs and death certs, and also.
Just tell me, just for a second, what she did, like just to explain who she is.
Oh yeah, Catherine Corless is, I hate to use the term, but what's known as a local historian. Now that is a pejorative term for somebody who hasn't studied history like me, or gone on to be a historian and write books and all that, and or maybe have a PhD in history, right? So they're a local historian. It's generally thought that they have limited scope. They're only interested in, say, in here in Tinahely, local Wicklow historian, and that's it. But she had done a course in Maynooth about how to research documents, how to dig deep, where to look in archives and all that. And she had an interest in a local mother and baby home that had since closed. And she suspected that all was not well in it. And the more she dug deep, excuse me, I actually get quite emotional when I talk about this. The deeper she dug, the more she found out that 796 children had died there and were unaccounted for. There was no burial place for them. Now that death rate is something like 10 times the death rate of children outside in the outside world. Nobody asked any questions. And then she dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and we all know now that they were found in what was a septic tank. They were unceremoniously dumped in a big concrete septic tank. At first, the Sisters of Mercy denied it, that they even owned the septic tank. But Catherine Corless, excuse me again, dug deeper and deeper, and she found from the 1800s, she found the purchase, the deeds of buying the septic tank. And it's featured, the deeds are featured in my picture. They're further down the table, they're kind of old and stained. And she found the deeds, and she knew that she was able to prove that that was the septic tank belonging to them. And then it's now become possibly the greatest single scandal of our state. Sorry again. Just so many children went that way, and the story is repeated elsewhere around the country. That just happens to be the biggest numbers. I mean, it's just a terrible thing that this state, the shame of this state. Sorry again. But that's Catherine Corless, a fantastic woman. She's got recognition for it now, and she's just an ordinary person. She wants to go back to life as it was beforehand, and they have got recognition and apologies for it, and there'll be investigations into further other mother and baby homes, and she feels she can finally, hang up her boots and go back to normal life as a farmer's wife,
Okay, Paul, tell me about the portrait of Cathy Henderson.
Okay, well, Cathy Henderson was my girlfriend for about 3.5 years. I met her at a little conference about the artists in prison scheme. She had done a 2-week workshop there, and so had I. So we met there and we sort of hit it off immediately. But around November 2012, she had a tickly cough that she couldn't get rid of. And she it wasn't responding to antibiotics, so her doctor sent her for a chest x-ray. And they discovered that she had stage 4 lung cancer, and she didn't have long to live. So they said, we can treat it, but we can't cure it. So she had a death sentence from then. So one of the things I like to do with my girlfriends is paint their portrait. Now, Cathy was a little reluctant to have it done, but I did it. But she immediately started chemotherapy and radiotherapy and all that. So she lost her hair. So she was actually wearing a wig when I did the photograph of her. And so when I do a portrait, I like to give information about the sitter. I don't like a head and shoulders or anything like that. To look at that portrait, she's an artist. And so I just had her full-length portrait of her in her studio, which was in Newtown, Mount Kennedy, and it was a typical cluttered studio. You can see it's all sorts of things, reference books on the shelves. It's her. Oh, another thing about Cathy is she had lost the lower half of her right leg. It was amputated just above the knee, sorry. And she wears a prosthetic leg, and that people often ask me, what's funny? The right leg looks a bit odd. It's like as though I wasn't out to paint it properly. But no, she actually wore a prosthetic, and the jeans, it's only a shaft of titanium, so the jeans it doesn't fully fill the jeans. So she had a specially constructed easel in her studio. The standard easel that most artists will have a few legs sticking out at the bottom, but they would get in the way of her. So she actually had one that was a bit like a periscope coming down from the ceiling, and the canvases were mounted on this periscope coming down from the ceiling in the middle of her studio. So I painted the picture, and it was completed before she died. And it was submitted to the OHA and rejected, which I was quite bitter about, I can tell you, because they knew her, they knew she was dying. But it was eventually shown in the Royal Ulster Academy up in Belfast. And I was very happy with that because Cathy, although she was English, she had her formative years in Belfast. Her father was a lecturer in Queen's University. And she met her husband there as well, who her husband and I are friends, and we sometimes talk about Cathy, reminisce, especially on her birthday and her death day. So that's that.
So Paul, can you tell me about your food fight paintings, and particularly, I suppose the first one, how to pronounce quinoa?
You've even mispronounced it. I was pronouncing it quinoa, but it's a Spanish word. It's quinoa, basically. But it's... Okay, I'll answer the first part of your question, which is I had an exhibition last year, which again was the combination of years and years of research and work, called Food Fight. And it's all about food sustainability and food security and anxiety around food and all that. And it's really it's partly about the gentrification of the population of Ireland. I mean, I grew up in a poor working class family, 10 kids, you'd be boiled potatoes with oxo gravy, beans, and maybe you'd be lucky to get a bit of meat. And now we're all growing up with all these fancy foods and from abroad, and we're all expected to have a beef stew in wine now, or maybe a Guinness beef stew, not good enough just to boil it in oxo anymore. So that's what it's all about. It's all about anxieties and new foods and new trends and what's in and what's out. The whole coffee thing is all part of it as well. I mean, when I was a kid, coffee was a luxury. Everybody just drank tea. And then the coffee thing came aboard. It was all instant coffee. And there was even that dreadful cheap stuff made from chicory, because coffee was pricey. It was always much more pricier than tea. And now we just have all this, Sumatra, organic coffee from Sumatra and all that. You can get all sorts of stuff. But basically, it's around the anxiety of all these new foreign foods that we're getting and how to pronounce them properly. Again, quinoa it's grown in sort of Central America. It's a native of Mexico and around there. It's a seed as opposed to a grain. It's high in protein. And it's one of the cheap sources of protein for a lot of people who are poor and who basically have a vegetarian diet, not by choice, by the way, not something a style choice, simply because they cannot afford meat. Meat is too expensive. If they have chickens, they keep them for eggs. If they have goats, they keep them for milk. And if they have cattle, they keep them for milk as well, until they stop producing, and then they kill them for meat. What happened was when quinoa became popular, because of all the trendy diets that are high protein to try and lose weight, like the Atkins diet is a high protein, high fat diet, low carbs. With all these low carb diets, quinoa began to replace a number of grains in other foods, such as rice and stuff like that, which are starchy. But what happened was when quinoa became popular, the price went up and it became scarce in places like Mexico. So poor people, campesinos, indigenous people of Mexico and Central America who depended on quinoa for their protein, all of a sudden found that they'd have to pay premium prices for it or do without it. So there you go. Simple thing like quinoa has becoming trendy, has ripples that are much, much further beyond Ireland.
Okay, and croissants to die for.
Ah, that's one of my favourites. It's the only one that's sold in the show. But you know that expression, croissants to die for. Go here, coffee to die for, a flat white to die for. Oh, you've got to taste it. So I just love that expression, to die for, because, you know, when you think of it, we're celebrating the centenary of the Free State and all that. And I was just in a Republican plot the other day again, and what would people really die for these days? You know, people have done it. People have given their lives up the north for a cause that, and taken a lot of lives for a cause. But really, we live in a time when the only thing that you'd use the expression to die for is a fancy food.
So that's where we have to leave my interview with Paul MacCormaic. There were many more pictures I would have loved to have discussed with Paul, including dolphin-friendly soup, I Feel Like Chicken Tonight, suburban wolves, the future of painting, the modern pagans, the barman at the bloody stream, and Tanya Elliott Nygaard in her studio. These are some of my favourites of Paul's work. But you can find these and many more if you visit Paul MacCormaic's website or follow him on Facebook or Instagram. If you enjoyed watching this, please share it with like-minded friends, lovers of figurative art and Irish art, and please subscribe to see more videos about art and painting.